Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Voice the Sasha Poshcast, your go to podcast for all things posh. This is your host Shweta Bhatt, and this episode is all about conciliation, featuring lawyer, posh consultant, editor of our monthly newsletter Voice, and Sasha team member Jessamine Matthew. Jessamine takes us on a deep dive into the provision of conciliation in posh law with a session followed by a Q&A. Without further ado, let's get to it.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessamine and I'm a member of Team Sasha. I will be talking through today's podcast and the topic for today is conciliation. So what exactly is conciliation? So if you guys look at section 10 of the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act, you would see that it calls out a very specific measure, right? It states that if the complainant so requests, then the internal committee can facilitate a conciliation process between the aggrieved woman and the respondent prior to initiating an inquiry. So what exactly is a conciliation? So very simply put, a conciliation is a form of dispute resolution in which there is no inquiry, there is no penalty which is awarded at the end to any guilty party. Rather, it is a kind of agreement between the two parties regarding the way forward in terms of that specific dispute. And so in this law, there is the option to conciliate workplace sexual harassment concerns. Now, this is a topic which has not been analyzed too much, and I thought it would be really useful for us to go into some of the key points regarding conciliation and how exactly it is conducted and what are the main things that we need to keep an eye out for. So what we'll be discussing today are three main things. First, we'll be discussing is a conciliation mandatory? Second, we'll be looking at the key challenges and the positives in any conciliation process. And third, we'll be looking at the modes of conducting any conciliation that the ICE can follow. Now, let's just start off. Is it a mandatory process? So the short answer is no, right? If we look at the law, it very clearly states that the entire conciliation process can be initiated only and only if the complainant requests for it. It is not something that the internal committee can mandate or determine should occur within the scope of any sexual harassment complaint that it receives. It is something which is completely voluntary, something which has to be initiated only at the request of the complainant. Now, why is this relevant, right? Why did I even bring this up as a topic? Well, the reason for this is that I have seen a few case laws in which some of the arguments made are that the internal committee has a responsibility to first facilitate a conciliation and only then move on to the inquiry process. However, the judgments in these cases have very clearly and unequivocally said that a conciliation process is something that can be initiated by the complainant or by the aggrieved person, and it is not something which is mandatory, it is not something which must be followed before the inquiry takes place. Now, when we talk about a conciliation, this is something which was not actually first mentioned in the Vishaka judgment of 1997, which serves as the base for the laws and the legislation that we are following today. It is something that came up in one of the previous drafts of this particular legislation. So in 2011, the Parliamentary Standing Committee was looking at the entire legislation and providing comments on the different clauses. And they also provided some key comments on the process of conciliation. So one of their recommendations was that conciliation as a form of dispute resolution in sexual harassment should be limited only to what are minor offenses. Because they took the view that if something is a major offense of sexual harassment, then something like an apology or a conciliation would not really fulfill the purpose of the legislation and would not concretely address the issue that has come up. However, this concept of major and minor offenses has actually not been inculcated in the legislation, so there is no difference as far as the law goes. However, some best practices, some things we can keep in mind before we conduct a conciliation is to first look at the power equation between both of those parties. So in any conciliation, the way it works is that the complainant would have certain requests and the respondent can accept those requests and agree to abide by them. If there is already a pre-existing power dynamic or power equation between the parties, then there is a strong likelihood that that power dynamic can carry over to something like a conciliation, right? It can, instead of alleviating the issue, can kind of entrench the inequality between the parties and prevent the best possible solution from coming out. Some of the other things we can look at are how many people have faced this sexual harassment. If it is something which has happened repeatedly with multiple people, or if there have been previous complaints of sexual harassment against the same individual, it is often advised that conciliation may not be the best route to take, right? And finally, when it comes to physical forms of sexual harassment, molestation, unwanted physical contact, in those cases also, it is generally advised that conciliation should be avoided as a form of sexual harassment redressal, because it may not actually solve the problem that is brought before the committee. So these are just some brief best practices that we can follow when we deal with any conciliation. But what exactly is the general discourse on conciliation, right? How exactly is conciliation regarded as a form of dispute resolution in sexual harassment concerns? So some of the key challenges that have come up in using conciliation, and this is based on research across the globe, is first of all, there is an inherent power imbalance, or there can be an inherent power imbalance between the two parties, which can skew the results of the conciliation in the favor of the person who has more power. So instead of the impartial and fair process that is envisaged in an inquiry, a conciliation can often leave room for a lot of influence by one party over another. There can be threats, there can be blackmail, which can be explicit and also implicit. Apart from this, a lot of people also note that sexual harassment is not just an offense at the workplace, but even outside of the workplace. And if we leave redressal of this issue to something like conciliation, and we do not award penalties for the same, then it can lead to a repetition, right? So this is based on the philosophy or the understanding that a penalty would act as a deterrent to any kind of misconduct. However, on the other hand, there have also been studies to look at the positives of a conciliation process. So some of the things that are observed are that it gives parties a lot of autonomy in deciding what is the best outcome for that person. So if I, as a complainant or a victim of sexual harassment, feel that the best outcome is maybe not a penalty to the respondent or to the person who has harassed me, but rather that that person should not speak to me or communicate to me again, and that is recorded in the form of an agreement, that may be more beneficial for me because of the fact that I may have to continue working with this person and I still have a work relationship to maintain. Right, so it gives a lot more autonomy to the person who is affected by sexual harassment to decide the terms and conditions on which they would like the case to be closed, and it also gives autonomy to the respondent to accept or reject those terms. Another reason is that, unlike an inquiry process, which is quite adversarial and confrontational, this is something which is entirely based on the agreement between these two parties, and not on, awarding penalties, and not on accusations and allegations as such. It's about coming to a mutual understanding and recording that in the form of a settlement. Now, when it comes to conducting a conciliation, I think there are a few things that IC members can keep in mind. So there are two main ways of conducting any conciliation. The first is that it can be face-to-face, in which both of the parties together can sit in the same room and they can, discuss the issue. The internal committee would be present in order to kind of explain the process and guide the parties through the entire thing. But the internal committee would not necessarily convey messages from one party to another. So this is a good method in which parties are, where parties are okay to speak to each other directly regarding the issue, and the internal committee members' role would just be to facilitate this session smoothly to ensure that the parties can come to a common understanding regarding that particular issue. However, I'm sure many of you would think that not every complainant and not every respondent would be okay with speaking to the other party face to face, right? So, for that, the internal committee can also follow a mode which is called shuttle conciliation. And this is basically where the internal committee would convey the sentiments, the statements, the requests of one party to the other, and then from the other party to the first party. And this process goes on until the parties are able to reach a concrete conclusion. So, in this method of addressing disputes, in this shuttle conciliation method, of course, it can take place, virtually. It can take place through teleconference. It can happen live, wherein the complainant is in one room, the respondent is in the other room, and the internal committees keep shuttling between the two. There are different ways in which this can take place, but of course it's always very important to remember that the time the time taken to convey these messages to each party should be minimal. The process should not be extended, so that the maximum or rather the best output or the best outcome can come for each party in the entire process. So these are the two forms of conciliation that can take place. These are the main things that I wanted to discuss today regarding conciliation. I hope that it is useful, and if you have any questions, any comments, please do leave them in the comment box below, or feel free to write to us at any point. Thanks a lot. So now we will be discussing some of the questions that came up in the context of conciliation in cases of workplace sexual harassment. So the first question is, what are the typical kinds of complaints in which conciliation is facilitated? So the law itself does not specify when conciliation needs to be facilitated. However, we have seen that it is usually requested in cases where the allegations are around sexually colored remarks that are made. It could be in the form of jokes, inappropriate compliments, sometimes some forms of romantic advances. So typically in these forms of behavior, the complainants have requested conciliation and the internal committee has facilitated it. So we see that when the allegations relate to physical forms of sexual harassment, usually the complainants do not opt for the method of conciliation and instead go ahead with something like an inquiry. Is it the responsibility of the IC to inform the complainant about the option of conciliation? Definitely during the first meeting that the internal committee has with the complainant, it's always good and important to ensure that all of the possible redressal mechanisms are properly addressed and made available to the complainant, which can be inquiry, conciliation, filing a police complaint, approaching the internal committee where the respondent is an employee, in cases where the respondent is not an employee of the IC, of the organization where the IC is looking at the case. So definitely conciliation needs to be informed as one option to the complainant. So what are some of the things that the complainant and the IC can keep in mind during a conciliation? Well, the first thing is that from a complainant's perspective, it needs to be remembered that the conciliation process is not meant to serve a penalty or to punish the respondent. Instead, it is intended as a process wherein both parties would come to a mutual agreement regarding the way forward and settle on specific terms and conditions. The internal committee needs to keep in mind that there may be a power equation between the parties, and to ensure that that power equation does not influence the conciliation terms and conditions. Apart from this, it also needs to keep in mind that all of the information conveyed from the complainant to the respondent and so on and so forth is accurate and represents the terms, conditions, and wishes, desires of the complainant and respondent in the entire process. Can a penalty be recommended by the internal committee as a part of conciliation? So if we look at the concept of a conciliation, it is not intended to be a process wherein, at the end of it, parties face some kind of punishment. It is purely intended to be a process wherein parties can come to an agreement regarding how they want to continue their relationship, their working relationship with each other. So the internal committee's role in such proceedings is only to facilitate the conciliation and record the agreement or the terms and conditions in the form of what is called a conciliation settlement. So while the internal committee may recommend that the parties and the employees can go through trainings and can ensure that they sit through all the relevant awareness programs related to the topic, issuing a penalty would not be within the scope of a conciliation. So in the workplace, when we talk about a conciliation, the intent is that both parties should be on an equal footing and should be able to commonly come to an agreement regarding the way forward. So when there is an inherent imbalance in the power between two people, there is every chance that the conciliation could proceed in a manner which is not conducive to one of the parties and actually violates the spirit of a conciliation as a whole. So, for example, if a complainant files a complaint against her manager and says, and the complainant also requests for a conciliation, the manager, by virtue of having power over that complainant's employment, including the salary that is paid, any promotions, any bonuses, any assignments to projects, there would always be some power that that manager would have over the complainant, which could then affect the nature of the terms and conditions that the complainant might ask for. So when we look at a conciliation, it is something which needs to be free and voluntarily entered into, and not something which can be entered into because there is either implicit or explicit threat to somebody's employment in the entire process. So it is very important that when a conciliation is being taken up, that the parties in the conciliation are at an equal footing, and even if they are not, that the internal committee can guide the parties through the conciliation and make sure that no party is unjustly prejudiced because of being in a lower position in the power equation. Since conciliation is essentially a process wherein parties can come to a common agreement, in certain cases, it may so happen that the respondent may agree to the terms and conditions asked by the complainant, but may deny the totality of the circumstances and allegations against them. So in such situations, a conciliation can still be entered into, and it is not always required for the guilt or the innocence of the respondent to be proven before a conciliation is entered into. So if the terms and conditions of the conciliation are violated, then the respondent is the one who has breached these terms and conditions, then the internal committee can initiate an inquiry against the respondent, and the processes under the inquiry aspects would continue to apply, including issuing a penalty or a kind of punishment upon the respondent if he is found guilty. For conciliations, unlike for inquiries, there is no quorum which is mentioned, and therefore there is no specification about which person should be involved in facilitating the conciliation proceedings and which should not. That being said, it is a best practice to ensure that the external member and the presiding officer are both part of the team that facilitates the conciliation proceedings between the parties, so that effective measures can be taken and that any kind of bias can be minimized through the presence of the external member.
And that was our episode. How did you like it? What questions do you have under the subject of conciliation? What practices have worked for your organization? Let us know by writing to us at voice@sashaindia.com. If you liked our episodes, do follow us on social media and share with your friends and colleagues who are interested in this topic as well. Until we meet again next month with a brand new episode and theme, this is your host Shweta signing off. Take care, stay safe, and remember, prevention and protection leads to progress.